this morning is Dr. Bart Lardner. He's the senior research scientist with the Western Econ Center focusing on cow-calf and forage production research. His research activities include grazing systems, evaluating animal and perennial forages, grazing movement and nutrition, calf background programs, utilizing ethanol products, ethanol programs, water quality research, and nutrient management nutrient systems, resulting in the publication of over 55 peer-reviewed scientific papers.
Well, thanks very much for that kind invitation. And what I want to talk today about is a little bit about our program at WBDC. I want to define about what our program focuses on and talk a little bit about this best kept secret of our Western Manitoba colleagues. WBDC is a systems-based research facility in conjunction with the University of Saskatchewan, out of Saskatchewan. And our whole goal is to do applied beef and forage research. And so the work we do, hopefully producers can take home and think about integrating or applying or utilizing on their farm or their ranch. Or they can look at our mistakes and say, hey, I don't want to do that. Been at this a little bit over the years, and so certainly we're all reading the popular farm press, the publications that are out there, but you know, I'm teaching a class this fall in 2014 at the U of S, and those students that I'm talking to, they aren't reading the Cattle magazine, they aren't reading the Western Producer, they're on this thing right here, the social media guff. And so even an old guy like me has to get on Facebook and get on Twitter. So certainly, if I can learn new vehicles to communicate, all the better to get that information out to the ag industry. We're located 1 hour east of Saskatoon at Lanigan. This is my laboratory, and I'm very, very fortunate to be able to go out there and run our program. Around 3,000 acres of mainly tame seeded forages, annual perennial forages, and a 390 Angus-based cow herd. What do we do? Over the years, we've done a lot of work looking at forage crops, annual perennial crops for grazing, trying to push the envelope, extend the grazing season. We did a lot of work on water quality over the years. The issues of surface water and groundwater, cow-calf management. How do we manage that cow over the calendar year? Or how can we background that calf in a different alternative system? And of course, this whole issue of animal-soil plant interface. And so, if we manage our herd in this location on our farm or our ranch, does that benefit the soil nutrient profile in the next growing season? As well, we've revisited this whole heifer development paradigm. And sometimes we're stuck in this groove or this benchmark of that's the way we're going to develop our heifers for future breeding females in our herd. Well, maybe should we be thinking about alternative systems? And of course, the uniqueness about what we do at WBDC is that we do the production research, but my colleague Kathy Larson, and she's also on Twitter, works with us to come up with an economic perspective. And so cost per cow per day or cost per unit grown is really her forte. As I said, social media, we're learning that. Those guys like me can figure it out, but we do have field day summer. We have winter grazing field day coming up December 16th. We're going to talk about information, whether we collect it on the cow, the plant, the soil, and in quick case, we're going through the motions of collecting that information. If we're not using it to make us more dollars on the farm or the ranch, what good is it? We'll talk about some of the genomic work that's coming down the road, and producers are getting very confused about. And we're also on the website with lots of fact sheets and videos as well. Well, we know that in Saskatchewan, in Alberta, in Manitoba, in Western Canada, the issue facing the cow-calf producer is that very long winter and very short summer. And so we know we deal with cold stress. Cold stress, not heat stress like our neighbors to the south. And so really, our major limiting nutrient in the wintertime is energy. So how can we counteract that? In the 1950s and 60s, when a lot of these areas were developed and cow herds were built, when I grew up in the 70s in northern BC with father, we had cows in pens. Landlocked probably for a good 8-7 months of the year, and so we hauled feed to those critters. We figured out the last 5-10 years that those cows can walk to the feed. It's kind of an intriguing thing. So we really don't see this happening anymore. In fact, I'm coming over here yesterday, lots of cows out there doing what they can do and utilizing forages out in extensive programs. So what I want to talk about here in the next little while is really about a unique crop that's coming at beef producers in the last 5 or 6 years. But really we need to remember that some of the work that's already been done is reduce cow costs per day from extensive feeding and utilizing the new nutrients, some of the work my grad student did years ago. And of course these options that are out there, stockpile perennial forage, bale grazing, swath grazing, annual cereals, or even utilizing residues, which is a great advantage that our neighbors to the south in the U.S. have been doing for many, many years. But when we manage these systems, we need to think of several things. Well, here I would suggest that maybe wind protection is pretty important, because if that cow is out there on a cold January day, subjected to a 10, 15, 20 kick wind, her energy requirements are ramped up significantly. So certainly natural shelter belts, coolies, and these things here, portable windbreaks are very, very necessary. The technology in electric fencing has really moved us forward. So we have solar powered systems that are very portable and work quite nicely throughout the winter months, given that there is management and monitoring. And of course, we ask cows to still graze, but certainly there's options out there. Subsidized programs from the government where you can purchase these winter watering systems for 1/3 or 1/2 the cost and set them up. Okay, let's talk about corn. That's really why I'm here today, is that it's been grown in Western Canada for 3 reasons, typically for grain and typically for silage for cow-calf or maybe feedlot. Well, now all of a sudden, there's a tremendous interest in grazing the whole plant with beef cattle in field paddocks. If you think about it, when we're managing these cows on those extensive systems I just mentioned a bit ago, and I don't care when you calve, if you calve in March or you calve in May, you're going to have to remember that they're going to need some supplementation program out there in those December, Jan, Feb, March days because of the extreme cold. So you either have to purchase that supplement, bring it to that program, and the cost of bringing it there, well, all of a sudden we have a crop that potentially can have all of those energy and protein requirements met. That's why there's an interest. Corn heat units are quite important. You need to work with your local rep to decide on which variety works for you. There's many, many corn companies out there. You know, I go back 15, 20 years ago when that first corn variety hit Western Canada called Amazin from Baldridge Farms, Ohio, 3,000 heat unit variety. I planted it at Lardner in Saskatchewan. It got about that high and then it sputtered out. I wrote an article in the Cattleman magazine. Really, really ticked off the guy that was selling the seed in Western Canada making thousands of dollars. But that was our job, was to talk to the producers and tell them that this is a variety that's maybe not adapted to Western Canada, given it was selected in Ohio. However, there's lots of advancement in corn heat units. We see the big companies doing major breeding programs, and so we have these varieties that are 21, 2050, 2150 heat unit varieties that will work quite nicely. It's a simple equation. You can get it on the internet. You don't have to memorize that. And I looked at these corn heat unit maps. And so here we are today, and you guys can get away with lots of, maybe moisture's your limiting resource here, but certainly a lot of heat units. If you look there, about 2,300 heat units. Myself, at Lardner in Saskatchewan, I'm about, on average, 2,100 to 2,000 heat units. Also, there's other great websites where you can figure out wherever your ecoregion is, where your farm, your ranch is. And I think this one here is the one that I like to go to, farmzone.com, and figure out your heat units and potentially what can I look at for a variety that will work for me. As I suggested, I work with my agronomic friends. Of course, I'm a ruminant researcher. I'm not a crops guy, but I do cooperate with you folks quite a bit. Learned a lot. Thank you very much. So seeding rates are quite important. 28,000 to 35,000 per acre, depending on your needs. The biggest thing is this one right here, soil temperature. You might be told that you want to get it in the ground by May 15th, but the soil is really too cold. And so you really need that soil to be warmed up. Seeding depth is very, very important. Row spacing is extremely important in my mind, because we've done both the work with the air drill and the corn planter. Found that if you go with the air drill, you're going to probably suffer yield losses of 10 to 15% compared to your precision with the corn planter and the row spacing. Corn is a high fertility attention to your N&P. And the neat thing about utilizing or grazing cows on these fields is that there is that nutrient cycling happening, and all those manure nutrients going back into the soil. Corn is not very competitive. It's a seed for a crop, so it does not compete very well with weed pressure up to about knee high. So you have to come in about the 3 and 8 leaf stage and hit it with that Roundup just to control that weed pressure. The first varieties that hit Western Canada were those that were not Roundup ready, that was tank mixes, and so I was up there on the seed drill and trying to cook these herbicide cocktails and kind of grow nuts for a while. Anyway, where does it fit into a grazing system? Because it is very high in terms of nutrient value. Energy is not an issue. Protein might be an issue for a very pregnant beef cow in third trimester of pregnancy coming into calving. So pay attention, work with your nutritionist, and make sure that you're looking at the protein deficiency. We know it's going to actually meet and or exceed beef cow requirements, and some of our work at Western Beef is looking at how can we utilize it with wean beef calves. The big thing about asking cows to go out there is understand that cows are very preferential. They have a high preference palatability, selection, behavior, and so they are going to find the ice cream part of that plant. They are going to go after the cobs first, so we need to control that. So I'm suggesting we limit graze a 3 to 4 day process, because they are going to go out there and they will find the cobs, and then they'll, in day 2 and day 3, we're going to ask them to eat that high fibers, the husk, the stalk, the leaf part of that plant, just to get that fiber, that effective NDF in the rumen. And so really, we want to look at, okay, they're going to prefer cobs, and they're going to go after the fibers part of the plant in day 2, 3, or 4. You know, when you're working with naive cows, it's really quite intriguing. They've been used to having round bales, called the round bale feeders, or feeding them in a dry log pen, and then all of a sudden we're taking them out to a field, putting them into a 2-acre strip of corn plants and saying, hey guys, you have to chew on these trees. That's your forage. And so you'll see 1 or 2 animals kind of figure it out and start to test those plants. Once that cow takes off and starts to consume that whole plant, the rest of them follow. And so it's really a learned behavior, and they really do catch on quite readily. But we need to control. We need to limit access to what they're doing. We know that NRC publishes the requirements for a beef cow. This is the energy on the top and protein requirements on the bottom. And you look at, okay, this is when she's calved. She's needing energy protein for lactation all the way through the summer. We peel the calf off. And I don't care whether we wean in October or we wean in January. As soon as we remove that calf, that's the lowest requirements for energy and protein. Can we take advantage of that with the corn crop? Where does it fit into these nutrient requirements throughout the calendar year? Well, we know that when we peel the calf off, she's only going to need less than 7% protein and about 45 TDN, so certainly that wouldn't be where corn would enter the picture, probably in that 2nd trimester of pregnancy and then well into that 3rd trimester of pregnancy. And so we look at protein levels on corn ranging from 7 to 9, and of course TDNs in the high 60-64% TDN. What's interesting is that the cob is making up about 50% of the whole plant in terms of percent of dry matter. The rest of it, the fibers part, is the remainder of the plant. And you can see as well that in terms of NDF, the fiber, the husk is the highest portion and the cob is the least portion. So where do we want to really utilize this corn crop? And this is really new territory for us in Western Canada as beef producers. So I'm suggesting that maybe we look at a variety that's going to be 100 to 200 heat units more than in the area that you live in, and so we don't want that crop to go to full grain maturity. We don't want it to go to black layer, because then we're grazing whole plant corn. Maybe we want those crops to be in about half milk line. So then we have an equivalent level of starch and fiber in those plants. And so we're reducing selection by giving them that 3 to 4 day allocation. The first 24 hours they're going to utilize cobs, have a high intake of starch, but in day 2, 3, and 4, they're going to be eating the fibrous portions of the plant. So we're suggesting maybe that half milk line, maybe that R5 stage. Which plant would you prefer? When you look at this 4 different plants here, the obvious thing is that maybe I want the taller one, right? I want to pick a winner, but then when you put in the varieties below them, you can see that, in fact, this is that Amazin Graze. This is 2001 data, Panoka, Alberta. So really, it's all about these different varieties and the ear weight of each of these plants. And so really, as we know, that starch is going to be a major portion of that plant and the balance with the rest of the plant structures to hopefully equalize that intake of energy and protein. So we're saying, yes, limit graze, force these animals to maybe go back and back graze and clean up the fibrous part of the plant. The thing I talked about in terms of naive cows, you'll get 2 or 3 that will figure out how to consume these plants. The rest of them will follow. And I also strongly suggest that you go with a very good mineral program. Work with your nutritionist to make sure you have adequate cal-phos ratio and certainly elevated levels of copper, zinc, and manganese. Let's talk a little bit about some of the work we've done at WBDC. We did a trial evaluating 5 different varieties a couple of years ago. These were seeded June 1, even though the agronomists are suggesting getting it in the ground by May the 20th. Even getting it in the ground June 1, we saw fantastic yield response. We grazed it, remember the fed. Here's the yield on dry matter basis. I work in dry matter, not as fed, and certainly the nutritive value of the whole plant and the plant structures themselves, adequate protein and energy. And with our work, we're coming in with costs. And so you can see the range of input costs. Kathy Larson's calculated us $208 to $226 per acre of input costs. So certainly a high risk, high input, but hopefully high reward crop at the end of the day. This is in a fact sheet on our website. How do the cows do when we put them out there? You can see that their graze days range from 145 to 318. Okay, so those cows were camped on those acres for longer days from one variety to the next. We did the numbers, we crunched the numbers, and then found that our grazing costs range from 70 cents to about 40 for these 5 different varieties. And that's only work done in 1 year at one location. Remember that. How would it work for your operation? As I said, we know we can manage trim the beef cows and the whole plant corn, but really can we entice weaned 5-weight calves to go out there and hopefully put on some gain in extensive grazing programs. And so we're into the 3rd and final year of a 3-year study with one of my grad students where we're evaluating calves, backgrounding calves, on grazing whole plant corn, grazing spot barley, or being fed a dry-based barley hay ration and dry lot pen. So really our challenges here were consideration, were they going to be able to utilize or have an intake of energy protein to meet that 1.8 pounds a day that we have a targeted growth rate? Do we swap it? We did a trial about 2002 where we swapped that corn crop. And so really, what is your targeted gain? So over 3 years, we've had quite a few calves go into this program. As you can see, the 3 treatments there. And we're allocating corn to these calves every 3 days. What we do is we get them well weaned and then we bring them into those paddocks and we get some trainer cows with them, so the trainer cows are actually showing the calves what to consume. Once the calves are utilizing corn, they're off to the races. We found as well that we want to meet that targeted gain of 1.8 pounds a day. We have to come in with a bit of a supplemental range pellet at about 5 pounds per head per day. When those calves came off those backgrounding programs, they went into the feedlot, were finished to about 12 millimeter back fat, but from each of those backgrounding treatments, they were placed into 1 of 2 feedlot diets, either corn grain or barley grain being the difference, and then taken all the way to finish. Okay, as you can see, challenges in using extensive backgrounding programs. This is the critters going out, and this is the critters coming back. And so environment will certainly put a damper on your objectives and your potential to stay out there for 100, 120 days. But the good thing is we came back with mature cows and utilized those fields in the spring. Speaking about utilization, as I said, these calves get on with it quite nicely. We strive for that greater than 90% utilization, but certainly wind, snow depth will be an issue. But you know, one of the neat things about these whole plants, they actually act as a windbreak. And so the calves that go to that treatment were actually in better situation than those guys in the swath graze field. So as I said, we're looking for that residue remaining after those calves come out, and about 90-95% utilization in that field of corn. Let's look at the nutrient value of this calf backgrounding program. You can see as well our proteins were a little bit lower on the corn compared to the barley, and as well our energy was a little bit higher compared to the barley. How did those calves do? This is 2 years of data. We don't have year 3 in here yet, but you can see our barley and corn programs. We reached that 1 5-pound a day compared to our dry lot calves. It's certainly respectable background performance. How did they do when those calves went to the feedlot? We found there was no negative effect of the backgrounding program on feedlot performance for each of the treatments. So no negative effect there. So what are some of the concerns that we're seeing? Well, really it is all about limiting access to the crops. Limiting this issue, if you're going to turn 200 cows into 40 acres, they're going to choose the cobs. You're going to see death, loss, mortality, morbidity because of rumen acidosis, starch overload. So we're suggesting to do several things: adapt 7 to 10 days, allow that rumen to move from a transition of a forage to maybe a grain starch type diet. Addition of a roughage source out there is very prudent, and limit graze time as well. In that corn trial that we did with those pregnant beef cows in 2nd and 3rd trimester, we were wondering, okay, what really happens in the rumen of these cows out in those field paddocks when they get allocated that fresh 4 days of feed? So does that affect rumen pH? Does it affect rumen volatile fatty acids, rumen osmolality, all those things? So we put a split or a experiment within that RCBD that we were doing with those cows, and we had a 3x3 Latin square where we had 9 cannulated cows out in those winter field paddocks with those intact cows. Probably the first winter grazing study with cannulated cows that I know of in North America. We've done a lot of work with cannulated cows in summer grazing programs, nothing in the winter. Quite a challenge from our research staff and my grad student who came from India. So what did we put in? We put in these indwelling rumen pH meters. Dr. Penner at U of S invented these. They're kind of a neat thing. We can measure rumen pH fluctuations every minute, and we put it in with in where the cannula fits in the bottom end of the rumen. So what did the data tell us in year 1 and year 2? Kind of interesting. We found that, in fact, corn was not the culprit in year 1. Barley was the culprit. Why? Because in year 1 we saw a lot of predation from blackbirds on the corn crop. They came in and ate about 1/3 of the top of the cob in each of those plants, so certainly the starch was less in the corn in year 1. Year 2, corn was the culprit. So we did see a level of rumen drop below 5.8, which would be suggestive of subacute rumen acidosis in the corn in year 2, but in year 1 it was the barley, the cows that were out there utilizing the swamp barley. I suspect that coming in the future, we're going to be growing corn for grain, and then we're going to come in and graze corn stalks. That's the best kept secret of our neighbors in Nebraska and North and South Dakota for years. What a great residue to be having cows out there after they peel the calf off. Kind of a double cropping situation off that same acre of land. So just to summarize, yes, these low-heat varieties are certainly a potential there to move into a cow or a calf backgrounding program, but really, if we're looking at this crop, we need to start small. If you're not comfortable with it, don't even go down this road. Start small, manage and monitor, and you need to have a well-input plan when you're getting it seeded in the field. Work with a grain guy if you're just a livestock guy, but once the crop gets out there, you want to manage it, use all of these suggested techniques. So I strongly encourage you to click on our website, look at the videos, and then you can shut me off after about a minute there. Thank you for your time.
We do have time for a few questions if you wanted to stick around and answer a couple.
Yeah.
If anybody has any questions.
Yes, sir.
Sir, what's your stocking rate? What's your forage mass versus cow?
We are allocating around 30 to 40 pounds of something per cow per day. Now, what I find in my world, because I only have 400 odd cows split between 9 to 12 different projects, I can't get the stocking density that a producer would when he put 200 cows up there. So I would I have strongly seen evidence that a lot of producers that are grazing 100, 200 cows in a field paddock, or maybe half an acre, or maybe 2 acres, 3 acres, they're getting better utilization. And so I just don't have the 200 cows per replication. In my role, I have to replicate things in space and time. Like I like to do things over 3 years to get good results that I can make solid implications to you about versus 1 year anecdotal observations.
Without rolling the corn or barley, are they getting the full benefit of the grain?
Okay, good question. Without processing the corn or the barley, are they getting the benefit of the grain? We feel that at that half milk line, they are getting more of that starch from the kernel than they would beyond that in terms of maturity. So 3/4 of black layer, no. The other thing with barley is that yes, if it is full mature barley in a swath graze situation, you will see a lot of it passing through in the manure. But you know what? Where are recommendations coming from for harvesting annual cereals for swath grazing? Where are those recommendations coming from? Anybody know? From grazing it for swath grazing? No, it's for ensiling. Soft dough is for ensiling, isn't it? So that's my next research trial. We've done some small metabolic work with Dr. Penner at UMS. We found that if we let that barley go to hard dough, we get greater amounts of effectively degradable dry matter than we would at soft dough. So that means more nutrients being absorbed, retained, and utilized for that cow. Good question. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Is there a benefit of corn over sorghum?
Sorry?
Is there a benefit in corn over sorghum?
Is there a benefit of corn over sorghum? If do you grow a lot of sorghum in southern Alberta?
I have neighbors that do.
Sorghum for grazing?
Yeah.
Sorghum sedan grass, I would suspect, yeah. Sorghum has its fit. It's a C4 plant as well. You won't get that cob, that starch, so you may have to look at a supplementation program. When any of those stockpile programs where there is no cob, like whether it's a perennial grass species, and you're trying to stockpile forage and use it from October well into Jan-Feb, as it gets colder, the energy requirements ramp up. So that's when you have to step into the supplementation program. And I've seen sorghum being used on a lot of producers' operations. I cannot grow it in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. It would not get beyond knee height. But certainly sorghum is another crop and opportunity out there. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Sorry? Is there a difference in pregnancy rate when the cows are on corn versus another program? The question was there a difference in conception rates if these cows are grazing corn compared to maybe a traditional winter feeding program? The other thing that we traditionally do with all of our extensive programs that are 3+ years of Western beef is we collect all the reproductive performance data. And to date, no, we have not found any negative effect on calf birth body weight or calving length, calving interval on these cows, whether they're grazing corn or whether they're in a dry lot pen being fed roundbell hay or in a swath grazing program. So no, we do monitor that because really it's all about if we take these animals and move them to an alternative system, does it have a negative effect on fertility? You know, that's going to make me respond one more time to trying to do everything right to make sure your cows get pregnant. Because if she doesn't give you a calf, she's not servicing the debt on her development costs. What I find is that certainly pay attention to summer breeding program nutrition. We are finding some issues with higher open rates on second calf cows in summer calving systems. So that to me is there's an issue in terms of nutrition during the breeding season. We know now that we can supply nutrients to those calves during parturition, but now we need to think about nutrients during the breeding season. So we're doing some supplementation work in that area. The second thing is look back to the bull. You know, it's ironic that a bull sale is just an assumption sale. We're buying it based on assumptions, on whether that bull's actually going to breed. We have no idea. But we don't want our buddy next door to get it, or the guy to see $2, because we're going to bid that $2,000 or $3,000 more to get that bull. We're going to look at the EPDs, hopefully there's accuracies on the EPDs. We can bring it home to the ranch. We can get the vet out. He can do a BSE test, a fertility test. But if that bull has no libido, has no ability to go out there and actually service cows that are in standing heat, what good is he to us? And secondly, do we know how many calves come from that bull in a multi-center breeding patch? How do we know that? We don't know that, do we? We assume, don't we? So that's where the DNA is coming in. We're doing some work on parentage testing. We're going to find out which bulls are actually servicing most of your calves, putting most of your calves in the ground that you're selling to pay for their feed costs. To me, parentage testing is a really useful DNA tool. Yes, sir. Yeah, corn is a very high nitrogen user, and so we found with the 24-inch spacing versus the 30-inch spacing, that the question was the difference between the 30-inch spacing and the 24-inch spacing. The plants tended to be smaller, weaker, and more scraggly. The optimum is to have 1 cob per plant, not 2, 1 cob per plant. And so row spacing and number of plants within a linear foot are important. So that's where we're saying 28,000, 30,000 seeds per acre. 1 bag will seed 2.5 acres, 80,000 seeds. Yes, sir.
Has any work been done on leaving calves on the cows into winter, say January or whatever?
Okay, the question was leaving the cows and calves together, grazing corn into the winter months. Yes, there's been some producers doing that. There's two schools of thought of that. It depends on where you are. What I'm finding is producers that do it in the south part of Saskatchewan can get away with it because they just don't get the snow depth issues that we do north of the 16 or the Yellowhead Highway. We will tend to see groups that are grazing in those areas, the cow starts to get dragged down, the condition starts to lose. We don't want body condition to go backwards coming into calving. That's the worst thing you can have. So, I guess if you're thinking of doing that, manage and monitor. When those cows start to go backwards, half time be and peel those calves off. But the calves will drag down the cows in some instances. In some other instances, producers are putting out that extra fiber source as well, like around the mill out there with those farm fields. So we learn from those folks as much as we try to come up with ideas at WBDC. So it's a fantastic partnership.